Hey there, it's Kayleen Holt from Scissortail Creative Services with some inclusive LXD insights. In this video, I'm sharing 6 tips for writing alt text to make your content more accessible to users with vision disabilities. Hello, and welcome to this channel, which aims to make the world a more inclusive place, one learning experience at a time. Now, you probably already know that you need to add alt text to images, but do you know how to write good alt text? For this video, I'm stealing from a blog post I wrote, and I'll include that link below if you'd like to check it out for 2 more helpful tips. Before we get started, for inclusive purposes, here's a description. I am a white woman with dark blonde, reddish blonde hair. I am wearing a white floral top with a navy blue cardigan, and behind me are bookshelves filled with books and decor and a couple of cozy mismatched vintage armchairs. Alternative text, or alt text, is a text description of visual content. Alt text makes non-text information perceivable to users of assistive technology, and it's required by WCAG Success Criterion 1.1.1. WCAG, or WCAG, stands for Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. WCAG requires that all non-text content presented to the user have a text alternative that serves the equivalent purpose. There are a few exceptions. For example, if you have an image in a test, you can include a descriptive label instead that doesn't give away the answer. Also, if an image is already fully described somewhere else, in a caption or the text that's directly associated with the image, we don't have to repeat the description in the alt text. Sometimes we don't need alt text at all if the non-text content is purely decorative. For example, if you're using a rectangle as a placeholder for text. Tools like Storyline 360 and PowerPoint allow us to mark those images as decorative, so assistive technology ignores them. Now, there's a different way to do it if you're coding websites. You include null alt text, which is basically a couple of quotation marks. Now that we've covered some basics, let's move on to my 6 tips for writing alt text. Tip number 1, keep it short, usually. It's a good idea to keep alt text brief. The general advice is to keep the character limit to around 100 to 125 characters. That's because screen readers used to truncate alt text if it was too long. They don't do that anymore to my understanding, but it's best to keep alt text brief because that's going to be a better experience for users of assistive technology. Now, in some cases, a longer description might be necessary, so we'll talk more on that later. Tip number 2, focus on the purpose of the image. The key to good alt text is conveying the intended purpose and context. Why is the image even included? What should users take away from it? The same image might require different alt text depending on how it's being used. So, for an example, let's consider 3 different use cases for this image of clouds. If we're using this image in a leadership course that mentions blue sky thinking, it wouldn't be conveying any important information, but it's enhancing the user experience somewhat. So I'd use alt text like puffy white clouds and a bright blue sky above an open field. But what if we're using the image in a course for aspiring meteorologists who are learning how to identify different types of clouds? Then we'd need a more robust description, right? So I looked up some wording from NOAA.gov so I could get this right. So I described this image of cumulus clouds with something like this: detached, mostly dense clouds with rising mounds like cauliflower. Sunlit parts are mostly bright white, and the bases are darker and horizontal. In this case, the sky and the field aren't really important parts of the image. You could describe them if you wanted to, but I don't think you'd have to. Now, let's say we're using a washed out version of the image as a decorative background for holding text. In that case, we probably wouldn't need alt text at all. We could just mark it as decorative. Tip number 3, leave out image of. Most of the time, we don't need to start alt text by saying image of or photo of and all of that. A screen reader is going to identify that it's a graphic, so there's no reason to add those unnecessary words. So let's say you have a slide that has 10 icons on it. If your alt text begins with icon of every time, then you've added 20 words to the total word count that an assistive technology user has to wade through to understand your content. But sometimes the type of image is important to understanding its meaning or its context. So in that case, you might want to include those words. For example, it might be important for a user to know that the image is a bar chart or a headshot or a hyper-realistic pencil drawing or an oil painting or whatever it is. So in those cases, feel free to add those words to the alt text. Tip number 4, use long descriptions when needed. Long descriptions are helpful for describing the image in greater detail than we can do in brief alt text. It also makes the image accessible for those who don't use assistive technology but may also have trouble seeing the image. Long descriptions are visible to all users. They're not embedded in the image like alt text is. I use image descriptions for complex images like charts and graphs, or for images that have text on them, which might not be legible when it's enlarged, although it's better to avoid images of text if you can. So what does this look like in practice? Where do you put that long description? For e-learning courses, I usually place an image description link directly below the image, which brings up a pop-up layer with that description in it. If it's an instructor-led course, I'll include the long description in the slide notes of the PowerPoint, also in the participant manual, especially if they're not getting the actual PowerPoint file. That way everybody has access to it. So a screen reader user isn't getting a lot of repetition. I'll include a sentence in the alt text like, see the image description link for details. Tip number 5 is remember your audience. Remember that you're still talking directly to the user, so use the same tone in the alt text that you use elsewhere in the materials. Now, as a dog lover, one of my very favorite social media accounts to follow is We Rate Dogs. Not only do they post photos of adorable dogs who are always rated 10 out of 10 or above a 10 out of 10 as they should be, but it also provides some of the best alt text examples I've ever seen. Here's an example with 2 images posted by the Dog Rates Twitter account or X account in February 2024. The caption says, "This is Milo. He has initiated a pounce. Please brace for impact. 12 out of 10, I am so ready." The alt text for each image is very much on brand. The alt text for the first image is a chocolate lab puppy stands in the distance in a grassy yard. He approaches with an intense stare on his face and his tail hooked dramatically to his left. Dare you to blink first. The alt text for the second image is, the chocolate lab puppy is much closer now and actively mid-pounce. All his feet are off the ground, his front paws extending toward you as his tail blurs straight up behind him. His floppy ears fly up and out like tiny wings, and his eyes have not broken their focus on you. Isn't that great? The writer of this alt text fully understood the assignment and the purpose of the images, which is to provide dog lovers with an overdose of cuteness and humor to brighten their day. It always works for me. Tip number 6 is test with a screen reader. It is always a good idea to listen to your alt text by testing with assistive technology, such as the free NVDA screen reader for Windows, or if you have a Mac, there's the VoiceOver screen reader is built into Mac computers. Or you can use another tool like JAWS for Windows. If you can, hiring a native screen reader user to test your products is the best way to ensure accessibility and user friendliness. You can find a list of companies who do this kind of testing at the accessibility.com vendor directory, which I've linked below. To recap, here are my 6 tips for writing good alt text. Keep it short, usually. Focus on the purpose of the image. Leave out image of. Use long descriptions when needed. Remember your audience. And test with a screen reader. Using these tips will help make your content more accessible to users of assistive technology, such as screen readers or braille displays. You can learn 2 more tips on my blog, which I've linked below. Well, that's it for this edition of Inclusive LXD Insights. Till next time, remember, in a world where you can be anything, be inclusive.